the events that lead up to Odysseus and Penelope having their time together in Book 19, there's some further questions we can ask about how this whole set of stories comes about. What exactly does Penelope know about what's happening in front of her? It's a very subtle couple of suggestions that Homer makes that maybe Penelope actually knows a little bit more than we might think that she does. It's not exactly clear what her state of knowledge is at any point in time, but it's also seems that there's a little more that she knows. She's busy with her weaving and her unweaving, and this cleverness of Penelope and her circumspect ability to move around events without necessarily getting right to them. It leads us to have a second look at her and ask the question of whether she might know more than appears at first. So she has had a back and forth through Eumaeus to make her connection with Odysseus. Odysseus is going to come to see her in the evening. In the building up to that, in Book 18, she is up in her chambers and she gets a visitation. Athena, in this figure of Eurynome, appears to her and kind of says, you know, it's time to start moving this thing along. So get yourself gussied up and go on down there and talk to these suitors and give them a message. Tell them you're kind of ready to bring this thing to a head. Penelope goes ahead and does that. She puts on her finery, comes down from her chambers as she does, walks into the public space, and starts to make a speech and says, you know, you all have been eating me out of house and home, but it's time for that to stop. You want to marry me, the old custom is that somebody who wanted to marry a bride should bring the gifts to that bride rather than taking her stuff to themselves. So you all should go off and bring me a bride. Bring me gifts. And she couches this in this elegant lie. She says, Odysseus told me, just before he left, that as soon as my son grew some hair on his chin, that if he still wasn't back by that time, it would be okay for me to go ahead and take up with someone else. Now, you and I know, reading carefully, Book 18, we know that that's a lie. How is it that we know that? We know it through Odysseus' eyes. One way of reading this scene is that we've got to ask ourselves, why is Penelope lying? What is it about this particular moment in time that leads her to come down and spout out this lie to this whole group of people? One possible answer to this question of why Penelope lies is contained in the response that Odysseus gives when he hears the lie. Odysseus, after the lie comes out, page 384, glows with joy at her trickery, luring gifts from her suitors now, enchanting their hearts with suave, seductive words, but all the while with something else in mind. So, what's just happened is that Odysseus, who happens to be out there among this group of people that Penelope is addressing, hears from his wife, an elaborate lie that talks about how something that Odysseus asked her to do if he was gone for this long is now requiring her to talk to them about bringing this thing to a head, about not just kind of carrying on with normal business, but we're about to change things around here and we're going to get into the next step of events. He asks himself, now, why does Penelope tell this lie? Well, Odysseus gives us the answer. According to him, she's lying with something else in mind. Now, what's the something else in mind that she's lying in order to do? Sure, it could be that she just wants to get a bunch of gifts from the suitors. That's what she says. It could also be, and look at what the effect is, that this is a way for Penelope to tell that stranger who she knows is out there in that group of people, that if you are really Odysseus, you're the one person in the world who's going to know that this is a lie. And if you really are Odysseus, you'll know that there's a subterranean message here. There is metadata attached to this message. And if you really are Odysseus out there, you beggar, you're going to know that this thing's a lie. No one else in the world would be able to pick up on that. So what Penelope has done is made a public statement in front of this whole group of people such that if the one out there who's a stranger just happens to be Odysseus, he will know that it's a message for him. because it is a purposeful lie that she's now telling to start to spring things to the next level. When she's doing that, she's cluing in Odysseus, if he's out there, that the next stage of events is about to happen. She's going to call these things to a head. And what she does is say, okay, you're now going to have to compete for me, and that's when the axe trick comes up. And remember, the way that Odysseus gets by cleverness, the bow in his hands and all the other weapons away from the suitors, he becomes maximally powerful and they become maximally vulnerable. The way he does that is by using this bow and arrow trick. So when Penelope says, yeah, I'm going to take one of you now because Odysseus said it was okay for me to do that. I'm going to take one of you now and we're going to bring things to the next level. She is announcing to Odysseus out there that this whole thing's happening based on a lie, and if you're Odysseus, you'll pick that up and you'll know, so that you'll be ready to know that something's up and I'm in on it. The lie to the broader public is seen through only by the true Odysseus, and this is her way of seeing if that person is the true Odysseus. Book 19, we get started on the conversation that goes back and forth. From now till the end of our lectures on 17 through 20, we're going to be talking about Book 19 in the coming 2.5 lectures, 2 more after this. 19 is an amazing book. All kinds of things happen there. Odysseus and Penelope come together. Odysseus has had his circuitous path throughout the broad sweep of the world and even down to the underworld, back through all of his adventures, and made his way back home. And now he's made it into the inner chambers of his house, having a private audience with his wife Penelope. She has gone through her own long path. Her suffering all these years, not having had this person nearby, has led her to this spot now in the room with Odysseus. They're having this private discussion back and forth. Now, as this beautiful painting here reflects for us, it's private, yes, but only to a degree. Look at the maiden off to the side, off in the dark, kind of keeping an eye on them. We have to remember that when Penelope and Odysseus are talking together, there are this whole ring of servant girls that are around the outside of them. And they can hear, just as this person here can overhear, they can overhear what Penelope and Odysseus are saying. So the indirection and the carefulness of both of them in revealing themselves to each other is likely because they're worried about what the other one is going to think, but it's surely also, especially in the case of Penelope, likely the case that she does not want to tip off these serving maids that there might be something up with this person who just washed on shore. He might be Odysseus. If they ran and embraced each other right here in the in their chambers on their first meeting, those servant women would see what was up, and you can be sure that they'd go off and tip off the suitors. The surprise of Odysseus is about to spring on them would be completely lost. So instead, they're both circumspect, both Odysseus and Penelope. She then, in the beginning of their back and forth, they're in this private chamber in the firelight. There's a kind of a closeness here in the situation to what Odysseus had with Arete, a closeness with a queen in a grand house by a firelight. She then asks his identity, his name, where he's from, and his parents. She also tells him of her own weaving and unweaving. She kind of lets him in on some of her schemes that she's been trying to play out with to keep these suitors at bay on page 395. Odysseus then launches in answer to her question of who he is on his long lie about his Cretan background. He gives his name there as Aethon and claims to have seen Odysseus, who is away at Dodona. He says, asking, it's interesting, Odysseus, and this disguise of a beggar, conveys to Penelope here, he says, your husband Odysseus, I've seen him, I know him, and I know he's on his way home. Right now, he's trying to decide whether he should come back home just straight away or in a disguise. He's at Dodona, he tells us, page 400, considering whether he should come back and just reveal himself directly to us or come back in disguise. Again, a subterranean message that this Odysseus disguised is saying, if the real Odysseus ever does come back, maybe I'm him. If the real Odysseus ever does come back, he's going to be careful about whether he should come in just waltz right in here or come back in disguise because things are a little bit off in his household. Do you think that's wise, Penelope? And Penelope's basically, getting the message that Odysseus is, if he's coming back, going to be cautious. She then responds, during this back and forth, a little bit prior to this, she responds quickly by saying, okay, I'm going to test you. You say you know my husband Odysseus? Okay, I'm going to test you. 397. First of all, she starts to ask about his clothes. So you think you know Odysseus, what does he wear? And Odysseus can go through and say exactly what Odysseus wears. Being him, he knows the answer to this question. She then starts to quiz him on more and more intimate details that only Odysseus would know. And this stranger who claims to know Odysseus is going to have to pass these tests. Eventually, even after he reveals himself to Penelope and claims that, well, I am the real Odysseus, there's more tests he's going to have to pass. Penelope will be cautious. She will be circumspect. Odysseus is surely being cautious here, but Penelope is going to be equally cautious in return. Neither of the two of them are able to just kind of drop everything and rush into each other's arms. There's too much danger afoot. Close of book 20, we get some further back and forth after all these signs come unfolding. We talked about these in the previous lecture. At the close of book 20, we have Penelope, wise Penelope. She is in this carved chair. She sits within earshot of the door, listening to what's going on. She hears laughing, rowdy men. We're told this is all on page 423. But as for supper, she says, what could be less enticing? Speaking about, she says, we don't know for sure this is in Penelope's mind. The way Homer tells the story, though, it's hard to tell. It seems as though this could just as well be in Penelope's mind. She's sitting listening, and the next thing we hear Homer saying is, but as for supper, what could be less enticing than what a goddess and a powerful man would spread before them soon, a groaning feast, for they'd be first to plot their vicious crimes. They'd been first to plot their vicious crimes. So Homer elides the difference between Penelope sitting and listening and this reverie about this awful stuff that's about to happen to the suitors. It seems on page 423 that Homer's giving us another hint that, you know what, Penelope kind of knows. These suitors are about to go down. There's more for us to say about book 19. The next two lectures will occupy us trying to piece together all the wonderful things in this intensive book.